It seems like malware is back to piggybacking on legitimate software. There's a legitimate tool known as MIAdmin, and it's used to provide remote access to a computer so someone can work on it even when they don't have physical access to the server. According to Monday's blog post, members of a criminal enterprise known as Lurk somehow managed to tamper with the MI installer so that it surreptitiously installed a malicious spyware program in addition to the legitimate admin tool people expected. To increase their chances of success, the criminals modified the PHP script running on the MI web server, suggesting that they had control over that website. Now, Kaspersky Lab experts went to the official MIAdmin website and tried to download the software. They succeeded, but when they analyzed the software from the website, it showed them that along with the clean, legitimate remote access tool, the Lurk Trojan had also been downloaded. The thinking behind the strategy is clear. The victim is unlikely to notice the malware installation because, due to the nature of remote access software, it's treated as malicious or dangerous by some AV solutions. Knowing that IT service specialists inside businesses don't always pay proper attention to warnings from security solutions, many would treat it as a false positive if it were detected by the AV solutions. Users didn't realize that malware had in fact been downloaded and installed on their machines. Now, this is certainly a sophisticated piece of malware that's been able to hide in plain sight and use a legitimate piece of software's own distribution system. And Kaspersky has determined that the Lurk Trojan has been propagated through AMI.com since early February 2016, continuing a trend that we've seen across the industry where not only does an attack take place and succeed, but the results are left in place for weeks or months before they're noticed. Now, the truly dangerous part is that since this was buried in the downloaded copy of legitimate software, so many security specialists thought it was a false positive. Now I'm going to bring my co-host Brian Chi in. Brian, how big a problem is the whole false positive issue when it comes to this kind of malware?
A lot of users don't really understand the scanning software, AV software, anti-malware software, and they think it's just a magical black box. Now, the philosophy has been so many people trust what comes off websites, and have forgotten over the years of things like people actually making copies of infected DVDs back when DVDs were the way to distribute software. It happens, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of, well, I got to trust the system, but it's what I downloaded. It's a fresh copy. And in this case, Kaspersky actually downloaded a fresh copy from the MIAdmin website. And lo and behold, the malware was already embedded in it. So it wasn't an attack vector from outside. This is a little on the scary side because typically remote access tools are considered a trusted admin tool. Why they're not using Microsoft Remote Desktop, plug. I don't know. There's a lot of things out there that I still have a lot of questions for the Kaspersky people and the MIAdmin folks. What happened? Why was it still there? Why was it not detected? Because it's been there since February of 2016. Weren't there some audits? Weren't someone checking it? There had to have been some sort of automation in there as the MIAdmin people put fresh, updated copies on there that it's somehow or another inserting the malware again. This is going to be a little confusing, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more details coming out as the Kaspersky folks and the Russian authorities dig deeper. And oh, by the way, this was Russian authorities, which is very cool because maybe the Russians are starting to play in the world market better.
Well, one can but hope. Lou, I want to turn to you because while Brian lives in the security part of the world, you tend to live in the dev side. And this is something that was an attack through the dev side, if you will, certainly through the distribution side. Is malware something that you tend to be aware of or think about during the dev and distribution design process? Or is it something that in the breakdown of authority and responsibility tends to be someone else's issue?
You know, we always are running through scenarios. We do threat modeling and security scans and semantic analysis and so on and so forth of the code, just to make sure that there's things that even some of the developers haven't put in there by mistake or even sometimes on purpose. And also we run multiple tests on pretty much every operating system that Microsoft in our case supports, as well as when we ship to iOS and Android as well. We do something very similar. The thing that's really interesting to me about this one is a lot of the operating system. Now, this is a Windows app, but a lot of the operating systems, like for instance, Mac OS and Windows, they have this concept of verification on digital signatures. So when you build a piece of that, when you build an app and you basically distribute it, you have to sign it with a special certificate, and that means that when you download the app, the operating system will attempt to verify that certificate when you run it, and if not, it usually gives you an error. Like for instance, this installer didn't have a digital cert, or this digital cert is from an unknown publisher, or do you still want to run this, that kind of thing. And so that's why to me it's almost like an education problem, because at this point users might be so used to that from downloading open source software, or maybe even running things from just right from the web, that they're used to just kind of clicking past those messages, and that's kind of the bad thing. But the interesting thing here is that this particular package uses an NSIS installer package, and that's not Windows installer. That's actually some open source packager that will create an archive, basically a zip file of the files. And normally you're supposed to sign that with this digital certificate, but in this case it looks like the one on their website wasn't signed. It was packed up with not only the admin software, but also this piece of malware. And then when users downloaded it, it basically auto and uncompressed itself. For me, I didn't see, actually I actually ran this thing in a sandbox. I didn't actually see a warning from any of the operating systems. Even Windows 10 didn't really say anything. It just kind of unzipped it. The weird thing is, I think it's because NSIS, actually, the installer actually runs preemptively at an elevated permission. So that's probably why it didn't give you any admin prompt or anything like that. So I think that's where the problem lies. And I think this might be something from an operating system perspective that might need to be patched. So that's my perspective.
It's interesting that you talk about the operating system and basically this halo that the application the users thought they were downloading provided for the malware. Brian, I want to come back to you, because that seems to be an attack vector that could be successful in a lot of situations. It's almost the equivalent of an attacking aircraft that flies within the radar signature of some larger aircraft. Is there a good way to protect against this sort of thing, where you have a piece of software, a legitimate piece of software that's likely to throw some security exceptions, and you have a second piece of software sliding under that? Are there good ways around that, either from the dev or from the user angle?
Yeah, actually, let's answer this in a couple of ways. First off, shout out to JJ Raised to the 4884. Yeah, the issue is a trust methodology. How well is the app trusted? So if it's coming from, say, the Microsoft or Apple App Store, there's supposedly a higher level of trust. We're not going to have this open source installer. So that's one thing. That's something that can be done in short term. In the longer term, the reality is a lot of these installers, you get what you pay for. And if your customers lose their trust in your product, then your investment in the free open source installer was a bad investment. So maybe it's time you buckle down, get a real installer that actually does the signing and maintain your signatures. That, I think, is the longer term. So short term, maybe we shift over to the app stores exclusively until they get their act together. And then maybe later on, we can start trusting non-App Store apps once people clean up their act. Maybe some sort of like stamp that they put on saying, you know, something certified or whatever. There needs to be a lot more trust in our dev cycle, you know, as we install apps onto our machines.
So if I get this straight, you're saying that stomping around the shadier back alleys of the internet is probably not a good idea when it comes to security. I think I'm going to have trouble wrapping my head around that. It just seems so counterintuitive.